if we as leaders can help motivate people by calling to attention and allowing them to see the meaningfulness of their work, that is a really helpful motivator. This is Keys to the Shop, episode 561, How to Motivate Your Baristas. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show, and of course, I'm glad to have you here with me today. Thank you for supporting the show over the last almost 10 years of talking about coffee shops and operations and service and hospitality. Just this business of Keys to the Shop is all about your business. It's all about helping you find as much success as possible, avoid mistakes, learn from other people's example, to give a platform to those in our industry, in the coffee shop world, who are doing work that is inspirational and informational and has insights and it has stuff that you can use. And that's where I want to just mention really quick. Using this stuff is very, very important. So make sure that part of listening is doing. Part of listening is walking out the things that somebody makes a good point, put it down on a piece of paper, bring it with you and try it out. Put it in practice in your business. So just a little caveat, just as I'm thinking about it, but I'm grateful for all of you. If you have the opportunity to rate and review this show with a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, that'd be awesome. And also don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as to the podcast itself on your podcast platforms. Now, we have maybe a few days left now where we are accepting applications for the key holder coaching groups. This is designed specifically for you if you are an experienced coffee shop owner, someone who has at least 2 years of experience running a coffee shop, brick and mortar, that is, where you have a team of people and you're serving the public this coffee day in and day out. This group is made up of coffee shop owners like that, like yourself, with sometimes 2, sometimes 10, sometimes 20 or 30 years experience. There's a lot of variation, but getting together creates community, especially when it's focused on helping one another. This is a peer-to-peer coaching program. I'm the host. I facilitate. I give input. Part of the deal with being a member of these groups for the 6 months that we meet together, it's a big commitment, but it actually leads to big results, right? Is one-on-one consulting with myself, as well as access to these fine folks in our groups. And also we bring in experts to chat with us in private webinars. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. So you only have a couple of days left here to apply to join the fall 2025 cohort. You can just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. You could fill out the application that's in the links in the show notes. Go to the website and click on coaching groups. You could do that there as well. But let's talk. Let's talk about what kind of a thing you're looking for, how this group could help you, and how you can help people in the group. So great investment. Hope to maybe have you in these groups. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Arto Brick. Arto Brick is a wonderful company out in Los Angeles, stone, tile work, hard surfaces, and also we're sponsored by the Barista series from Pacific Foods. The Barista series is an amazing product as well, and we're going to talk about both of our sponsors later in the episode. But right now, I want to jump right into the topic of motivating baristas. So here is the thing about motivation. Motivation is kind of a tricky word because people do want to work at your coffee shop. They applied to work at your coffee shop. They are already motivated. They applied. They want to work there. Now, when people get to the cafe, sometimes they figure out, oh, this is a lot more than I bargained for. And they stop being as motivated to do what they said they were going to do because the information about what that actually entails in their mind has changed a little bit. This is harder than I thought. And oftentimes you get folks that will put in their 2 weeks notice, or the work just goes downhill from there. And not everybody has the same level of stick-to-itiveness that we would like. I mean, frankly, we don't either. When we're faced with something that's harder than we thought it was going to be, you have to admit that if you have an opportunity to get away with doing less because of what you feel is this insurmountable or unforeseen obstacle, you probably will be tempted at least, or you will go for it. So a barista who says, I want to work in a coffee shop, and then they get there and it feels like a lot more than they thought, there is that group that will say, no, we're not going to do this anymore, or I'm going to stay here as long as I can, but I'm not going to perform very well. Now, that's where management and leadership comes in and says, first of all, we'll remind you about what accountability is and integrity, because when you say, I will work here and do the work required of me in this role, you actually are saying, I promise, it's your word. Don't make your word cheap. Keep your word. Now, you can talk to people about the work, but as far as you are able to, you should fulfill it. And I have had numerous jobs where there's absolutely no way that in a posting and in a document or even in a conversation, you can clearly convey exactly what you will experience in that job. It's just impossible. And so you're always going to have an element of unexpected challenge when you're getting into work in a coffee shop. Now, you as the owner or leader need to appreciate the idea that that gap exists, the idea of the work versus the work itself. And therefore, when you appreciate that gap, it gives you the opportunity to then say, what can I do to help people navigate that gap? To remind people about the reason they got the job in the first place, and to walk alongside them so they're not just alone with their thoughts and regrets about the job and the challenges that seem insurmountable. We're here to be problem solvers, and we're here to be coaches and guides and servant leaders in the business of, this means either helping them realize maybe it's not the right role for them, but if it truly is, we need to be there as their advocate to help them realize that. And it's up to you to decide how much effort you need to put into a person, time, energy, expense, to hang on to them, past which point there's a diminishing return. You can't perpetually keep a low-performing staff member on your team. And we all know this, even if you're not a leader, because you see that person still working and you dread working with them because you know you're basically working with yourself. They don't pull their weight. And when they leave or they're let go, it's unfortunate. And there's a lot of redeemable things about the person themselves. They might be a really cool person, but they needed to be let go because the work itself was primarily why they were hired. They weren't necessarily hired because of their personality. Now, we like to talk about personality. We like to talk about that being an asset. It is. But the work itself is the core of how everything else is orbiting, right? Or everything else that goes around that, it orbits around that work. We make coffee. We take care of the space. We greet, we serve with hospitality, and the unique personalities and cool idiosyncrasies of our staff, and that unique mixture of this year's group versus next year's group, and so forth, and those who continue on long term. That's kind of the fun part, but it has to be based on the work. And so our job has to be as those who facilitate success and believe in people's word that they wanted to work at your coffee shop, and you are going to help them successfully work at the shop. So the first step in motivation is not to assume that people don't have motivation. They do have motivation. It's the primary thing that started their journey of putting in the application in the first place. And what we need to do is add to that existing seed of motivation the virtue of working in the cafe and the security of knowing that they're in a group of people that are looking out for each other's best interests in the fulfillment of that work. So that's one of the main ways that you need to motivate people. And I wouldn't even mind if you said exactly what I just said to a new staff member, because it's the truth. When you put out onto paper or in a conversation the raw nature of the thing that you're about to undertake, and acknowledge that there's peaks and valleys, ups, downs, just all sorts of stuff that happens. But we are here I, as your manager, as your trainer, as the owner of this space, I am here for you so that we can be here for the community, so that this business continues to run. Okay, so this is the first part of motivation that we have to just know. We're working with people. You're not working against them. That's not how you motivate people, is to infantilize them or to say, well, they have zero motivation. That's not true. That's not true. We need to start being charitable in our assumptions about the people that we've brought on. Okay. Even if they are the wrong fit for the business and you end up having to let them go, at some point there was an agreement between you and them, and you both need to be in that conversation about how we honor that with our utmost energy and focus and discipline. So now that I got that as the first part, I want to go to the next thing in motivation. Motivation is all about, personally, you may have listened to the last shift break we put out this last week, and we talked about the refreshment of the soul of the owner, right? People need that. Baristas need that. You know, if you've worked as a barista, it is hard work in its own unique way. Yeah, okay, it's not working out on the prairie. You know, you're not baling hay. I mean, but there's difficulty in lots of different contexts, okay? So we don't need to downplay the investment of energy because we hold up at a higher level another higher output of calories somewhere, or physical labor and that kind of stuff. Can those things be motivating and say, hey, you know, I'm not working a 12-hour day in manual labor in the hot sun. I could be thankful for that. Sure. I mean, I have books. I'm almost done with the book Endurance about Ernest Shackleton in Antarctica. And when I read books like that, and I hear the hardship of being on the sea and then tales of survival, I'm like, I am frustrated about, you know, my printer, whatever it is that I'm frustrated about that day. You know, I can look and say, you know, it's all right. It's okay. People have risen to higher and more severe challenges than this. But I will say that it doesn't solve the issue of, you still have the people doing the work right there. You're doing that work, and you know you need motivation too. Because we are finite beings. We are faulty. We are forgetful. We don't remember the why behind the work. And that's one way to help with motivation, is to connect with something that is inspirational for that individual, which is to say, you have to have some degree of individual knowledge of your staff and a work relationship with them with the kind of detail that allows you to speak to how this work relates to them specifically. We've said it on the show before that you should be studying people just as much, if not more so, than you study coffee, because the coffee itself, at the point it brings itself to the hopper, right? You have this potential energy in that coffee that's baked in or roasted in, you know, grown in. And now your job is simply to create the environment in which that extraction can highlight the flavor potential within it. And that is exactly the same kind of thing that we should be doing with staff, to say that it's not just about the work. The work itself is not by itself motivating, right? I didn't grow up wishing I could just make a perfect cappuccino, but there's something about doing something well that speaks to a deeper part of my soul, and it allows me to see that I'm doing something that is fulfilling on a whole different plane than just the transactional. And if we as leaders can help motivate people by calling to attention and allowing them to see the meaningfulness of their work, that is a really helpful motivator. Now, it's not really that great to do this if you are not paying them what you can. So we're going to talk about payment right now. And I think, you know, it's expensive. Labor is expensive. Everything's more expensive. You got, you know, tariffs, you've got costs of goods in general, supply issues. What's the old blues song say? If it's not one thing, it's two. And I think that the principle here is pay what you can, not what you can get away with. And the way that you approach that subject is to tell people what you can and even why. Like, here is what we can pay you. Here's how we've organized this information. Like, we can have a staff of 4 or 5 baristas. We can pay them X number of dollars per hour because we know and we predict we're going to make them this amount of money every day. And here's how much it costs to pay the rent and continue to stay in operation with all these other costs. You got to go through and know what you can pay so you don't have this environment where money is a dirty word. Money oftentimes is a dirty word because we don't know a lot about money and we don't want to talk about it because we don't actually have a very good reason. So if you have a good reason and somebody asks you about making more money, you can just be right up front with them and say, well, here's why. And maybe we should have already had that conversation, but it goes a long way to tell people and truly mean it. We want to pay you as much as we possibly can, right? In terms of this role, we do have to make sure that we are profiting as a business because securing the next year of business, if you're a roaster, you're talking about different contract renewals, you're talking about a larger facility, upkeep of larger pieces of equipment. There are a lot of expenses to consider in future planning and not just paying the immediate bills. So when I say pay what you can and not what you can get away with, what I'm really saying is that you need to be on the side of generosity. And that needs to be a conversation that we have with people to say, we believe in the role of the barista, so much so that we want to do all that is in our power to facilitate your success through having a really solid, profitable business that can afford to pay you what we can pay you this role. And we're wanting to figure out ways to make more money so that you can make more money as well. Now, that's the part where you really need to be, you need to mean it. Okay. You can't just all of a sudden, you're experiencing this growth and it's really cool, but, you're not paying the baristas more, even though they're doing great work. Now, I am a person who believes that a person who's doing really great work year after year after year deserves a raise for their efforts. To a point, you need to know what that point is for your business because, if they stay there for 10 years and you say $1 each year, you might not be able to afford to keep that person. But the point is that the worker is worthy of their wages. All right. The principle remains that these folks are fulfilling the mission, vision, and values of your business on a daily basis. And even though people talk about money, like, well, that's not a primary motivating factor, it is an incredibly distracting factor when you don't have it. And I'm not asking you to bankroll somebody's entire lifestyle. Okay. I was mismanaging money in my early 20s as a barista all the live long day. Okay. It was something I learned a lot from, and I knew I was making what I could make and it was a fair wage and I agreed to it. But if we default to generosity and have an open conversation with people and even provide a clear path forward to say, you can make a higher wage here past the cap of the barista wage if X, Y, and Z happen, because in that particular role, it creates more leverage in the business to create more stability and more profitability. So this is what business is about. You need to be thinking of the whole picture. But as a leader, part of motivating your staff is to allow them to see your heart for their security as much as you can be a part of the solution. And when you don't speak on it, the words are put in there for you. The assumption is put in there for you. And you don't want that. Okay. So we need to be looking at how we can pay generously within the boundaries of what our business can handle. And that means also protecting the profit of the business to secure the future of the business, to perpetuate the jobs of the people working in the business. So there's a motivating factor right there. You don't want to not keep your word about raises and reviews and that kind of stuff. If that's part of your structure, then you need to be very disciplined to make sure people are getting those reviews and getting those raises, unless there's some kind of a performance issue, unless there's some kind of an exception to this that you've put into your system, right? But people are motivated by money, okay? And they will go to a place that it's one or the other. People, if forced, will work in a place they don't particularly like, but if they need the health benefits, if they need the money, they will go there and work there. but they might be willing to make a little bit less in a place that actually can't pay them as much as a larger chain might be able to. They can make it work because the work is fulfilling to them, because they like the people they work with, and they know that the heart of those who hold the most power in the business is for them. And you can't buy that. When the heart of the person who runs the business and holds the keys and writes the checks and has the sway and the leverage is for you, well, then that's a kind of a cool thing, right? Maybe more rare than it needs to be, but I've met plenty of people out there who are, doing a great job with this. Their concern is, how can we take care of our people? Why? Because they know our people take care of us and they take care of our customers. Well, hey everybody, it's Chris, and we'll be right back with our episode today on motivating baristas. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our sponsors. First of all, we can talk about Arto Brick. Arto is a wonderful company out in Los Angeles. They make all of their tile and stonework and hard surfaces there in LA. It's a family-owned and operated business, hand-painted tiles, countertops and wall tiles and everything else. Your coffee shop needs that unique feel, that people will put their hands on, they'll walk on. The material that you make your bar from matters a lot for the overall aesthetic and experience people have. So if you have something unique and cool in mind that you want for your next store, your new store, whatever, you remodel the current one, then include Arto Brick in the planning. They can make that thing happen. Whatever you're thinking of, they can make it happen. And then their tile work and their stone work, just give them a call or reach out on Instagram at Arto Brick. So I want you also to learn a little bit about our sponsor, Pacific's Barista Series. They are the originals for plant-based performance beverages. They have an extensive lineup of barista-focused, made for baristas and tested by baristas around the world. That's why it stands up to the heat from steaming, has great texture, keeps the flavor balance focused on coffee. So there's a great experience that your customer has every single time. So go check them out at pacificfoodservice.com and get samples. Try it for yourself. I think they're wonderful, and I think you will too. So go ahead and reach out again at pacificfoodservice.com. Now back to our episode. Now, another part of motivating your staff is all about how you include them in the planning process to come up with the systems and adjustments to the systems that they operate in. So I do a class at Coffee Fest on creating systems in your coffee shop. And in this class, part of the thing that I recommend is how, when you are creating this checklist or an SOP or a system, you keep in mind there are people behind that. There are people who have to carry it out. And it's kind of a weird thing that we do, where we get behind the computer and then we come up with what we feel like on paper is this amazing system for, workflow and working the bar. And we're going to, and it's very neat. It makes a lot of sense, but it has a lot of needless complexity. It's contextually inappropriate. It's impossible to accomplish. And it's akin to the kind of thing that happens with closers, where somebody who made the list is just saying, well, we have to do all of these things. There's like 300 things, and I'm going to give you 30 minutes past close to actually do all of these things. It is hellacious and it's ridiculous. And then people get miffed and upset when the baristas stay longer and they think, well, my business is going to go out of business. My labor is out of control, and I don't know why it takes them so long to close. In a lot of times, what happens is we assign responsibilities without any regard to the reality of how long it takes and the effort required and the effectiveness of the thing. Okay, so how do you motivate baristas? Well, start by figuring out what is appropriate, what's actually realistic to accomplish during the shift. If you tell people some kind of an overwrought, overly complex system and don't really set yourself up to solicit and pursue feedback and context, I don't care about open door policies. Well, if they want to ask me a question, they won't. They won't. And because you're scary, you're the boss, there's all sorts of assumptions behind who you are and what you represent. You're the man, So you need to get out from that banner of mistrust and figure out how to win trust by pursuing this kind of a relationship where if you're going to tell people, hey, we're going to do a new set of beverages, you got to be a little bit knowledgeable about what is possible based on your conversations with your staff about working behind the bar. I guarantee you, there are people working behind your bar right now that have maybe 2 or 3 things on their mind that they are really hoping that they get a chance to talk to you about. But because a business is busy and I have a life outside of this work and it's not my business, I just forget about it. I'm really good at overcoming dysfunction if it means getting to just kind of like let be what is, right? Like the status quo becomes my friend. It might not be ideal, but it is what it is. I told the story many times about how a place I worked before a long time ago, we lost a knockbox, RIP, right? The knockbox is dead. The bar broke or something like that. And I don't know, it took 3 weeks to get this knockbox replaced. But in the meantime, we had to use a trash can with a broom handle and some duct tape in the middle. But here's the thing. At first, it was a pain in the butt. Second week though, it started to become like a beloved friend. We were really good at it. I got the tricks. You can't really hit it too hard. You'll roll the broomstick a little bit too, so you have to like bounce it. I had a whole technique. We all had a technique. So what does this tell you? It tells you we can be resourceful. We do pay attention to details. But if we have to be resourceful because of a lack of resourcing, or we have to overcome a lack of information by assumption and putting things in place that just help us get through the shift, we can't be held responsible for or punished for what was lacking. Okay. So it's always going to be something where you want to point a finger back at yourself and say, what did I do to facilitate a misunderstanding, a lack of information, lack of resourcing and clarity, and help people do a great job through that facilitating role and include them in the process. Now, I'm not saying that, if you are turning over a new item and you say, okay, we're going to be getting rid of the, sparkling whatever drink. And we're going to be bringing in a new one. And we want some ideas. And somebody says, well, I have an idea. How about we don't do that? Well, that's not what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, you do have the right to kind of create your business the way you want it to be created. And at the same time, inviting people to add to the existing plans and also to voice concerns, legitimately say, I will take into consideration the things that, you are talking about as we discuss it. But what I'm talking about is including people in the addition to and the what ifs, and maybe if we did it this way. And maybe they do think, I don't really think we should do this, because you should be open to changing your plans based on the feedback you get from your people. And the best decisions I've ever made as a manager came from the polling of the conversations with staff who work in the systems, and then we create something that is what they get to work in every single day. This is why, by the way, a manager should be working bar shifts. And even an operations manager, if you are over a group of managers, I think quarterly, you should be working a couple of bar shifts. You need to stay rooted in the real world of the daily work. And if you are not doing that, then what's going to happen is your words, your efforts, they're not going to be received. It's just like a meteorite. There's not enough fortification around it. So it burns up on impact when it enters the atmosphere of where the actual work happens. I've got a book behind me called Gemba Kaizen. And Kaizen is the act of constant improvement. It's kind of a lean manufacturing Japanese principle, but Gemba means to take a walk, to go on the floor of the facility and see what's happening on the floor. Motivating people is to know that they are known. I am motivated if my boss knows about my work and about me and respects my opinion on how things are going. And if I see that a change is made based on my feedback, holy cow, like did I have this kind of power? That's pretty cool. So in summary, it is really important that you include people. So when we talked to Philip Paul Turner all those years ago about hospitality, he said that he wants to make people feel acknowledged, welcomed, and included. How is this not the perfect trifecta of practices where you can apply that to your staff and it helps motivate them? And if you combine the stuff that we've talked about the money, about the why behind the what, working with them and helping them understand you're on their side, but also including them in the evolution of the business and respecting their expertise that they develop working in your coffee shop, oftentimes with more knowledge than you have because you can't work every single shift at a certain point in your business, then motivation is a bygone conclusion. And at the very least, going through some of these things as an owner, as a leader, no matter what your leadership position is, you'll know you've done your utmost to go through this with your employee. And you can rest assured that your mindset is already geared toward helping in any way that you can, even if there are boundaries and there's an accountability process that is maybe a 1, 2, 3, 4-step process where at the end, maybe it means you have to let somebody go. But during the process, you know you're working with them to create solutions because that's just who you are and that's what you're basing your role on. So motivating staff, it doesn't have to be this mystery. You can hear a lot of this. It's tactical. Yeah. Okay. There's some material stuff regarding systems, regarding money, but there's also a lot of relationship and your orientation towards that individual and that group and being for them. And so I do think that this is part of how we motivate staff. It's, again, back to the beginning, you're not working against them. You're working for them and you're trying to work with the existing motivation that people have in their minds of why they wanted to work in your place in the first place. Okay. So let's believe that. Let's grow it. Let's add to it and work with people to create something wonderful. So hopefully this was something that was helpful to you, and I would love to hear from you. Let me know what you think. So you can reach out always by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com and follow on Instagram @keystotheshop. I truly want to hear from you. Doing this show here in the back office, and it has been 8.5 years now, longer than 8.5 years. It's going to be 10 years before we know it. One of the things that keeps me going is knowing that the content on this show is helping coffee shops and helping people in coffee shops. So always love hearing from you. Reach out if you're interested in coaching or consulting for you and your leadership team in your cafe. It's always an honor to get to work with cafes and really just help them make things just a little bit better or help people start their cafe on the right foot. This is one of the things that brings life to me, and I'm grateful for that. So reach out if that's something you're interested in. So again, thank you everyone. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.